Okay, so this is the week two recorded lecture for work and industry. So we're still talking about kind of assessing the worker in this kind of first section. Um, Getting into a lot of stuff around posture, how it relates to work, getting into the pelvis position, the tilt of the pelvis, get a little bit into the feet grasp as you're walking, bending, proper bending, just to get into that in the lab section. And then speaking of the lab, I get into a lot of hands-on stuff around mobility. Kind of extends the definition of ergonomics a little bit. Gets in a lot of advanced mobility stuff. I think again is really useful to you in the clinic around transfers. Do a little bit of NDT stuff, core kind of stuff, and then we have for those who are going to be in person, Maria Philbrook is going to be coming in to help out with all the transfer stuff. A lot of the stuff is organized and kind of posted in this week two lecture. It's also on your Google site under mobility tips or mobility education. There's a whole new site that has a lot of these great resources that you can use when you're out there in the clinic rehab settings. These are the learning objectives questions for next week's quiz. Those exercises you've been doing, those 1 through 4, and then the fifth one, kind of really going on your pelvis position, get an idea of sitting on your sit bones, your ischium versus your tailbone, and that nice slight anterior tilt like she has, engaging the psoas just enough, nice extension of the trunk with her abs, rectus abs and obliques there, we'll get into that. This ideal sitting position, a little bit of tilt there, and he's got his neck, everything not lined up nice, good core. The idea is to kind of really minimize the strain on your lower back muscles. Kind of relaxing your muscles as much as you possibly can when you're sitting to reduce kind of that pain as you're doing that kind of wave kind of stuff. We'll get into the fifth part about the neck one, the neck carriage one, which is also very important for reducing pain, for sitting pain, kind of focusing on that sitting pain. Key spots again, the pelvis, the chest and shoulders, and then the neck maybe more than anything. Okay, so this is our case, our dilemma for today. Hopefully we can, at the end of this class, you'll feel comfortable enough to kind of figure out what to do with this person. So our case today is Vladimir Putin. You may have heard of him, he's the leader of Russia. He has some strain in his lower back, his neck, especially in this posture, and his feet. When sitting and standing, he demonstrates forward head. There it is, his forward head. Rounded shoulders, kind of coming forward. Sitting on his tailbone. See how he's sitting on his tailbone here. And then here you get a better picture of how he has pretty much a flat back. It's pretty flat. Okay. And he walks what they call duck feet. Just excessive heel strike. Not much of a rolling, kind of a grasp in his feet. Just kind of banging on his heels, so to speak. Envision a Russian guard, where they march with those big duck feet kind of thing. He has that habit, probably from his old days in KGB or something. He says he's texting his generals a lot, so he's doing a lot of this. Not this so much, but this. This is what he wanted to do, but this is what he's doing. Constantly pacing the halls with his duck feet of the Kremlin, contemplating how to wipe out his enemies. And you've been assigned as his OT, and your order is to get rid of all of his pain. You've kind of gotten direct orders from the Kremlin. The first thing you think about is leaving the country in the middle of the night. And then you kind of remember all you've learned in work and industry, and you start to have a little hope. In particular, you need to determine what exercises can you use to address each of his issues. The forward head, sitting on his tailbone, flat back, and the duck feet. And then how cold is it in Siberia, and should you get sent to Siberia, that's where he sends all his enemies, should you start purchasing one? Okay, so let's think about sitting again at exploration 5. We didn't do that in class. It's a little bit kind of different one. Kind of really trying to engage just using your jaw as a hinge kind of thing, and trying to not engage those overly engaged, overly worked neck muscles as much as possible. And he has this kind of simulation, visualization of your kind of your neck floating upward without muscular effort. It really kind of lines it in the right position if you do that. So you're not doing this. So people do, especially when they get fatigued end of the day. They're working on something, like really not ideal position of their head, too far forward, too much strain, as we looked at with the scalenes and all that. And again, the idea is not so much strengthening these neck muscles, maybe strengthening, and we become more more aware of key muscles. Strengthening sort of, but really more engaging them. The strength is there, we're just not using them. The rectus, the core, to get it to extend more. And then kind of the spinal extensors back in here, so she's kind of rolling in her rhomboids to bring her shoulders back, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so posture, really getting into posture. You can be obsessed around posture. Where we stand, how we stand. It's kind of a result of a lot of different things. People stand differently, they have different postures, as we kind of saw last week a little bit. They have injuries, kind of lead to different postures. Emotional conditions, if you're kind of worn down, beaten down by life, you may have poorer posture. Your recurrent thought patterns, even how optimistic you are, kind of thing. Culture, job demands for sure, just your awareness. It's really the first thing to check out when somebody enters the clinic, because so many things can kind of cascade from that. It's a quick, simple, easy starting point for a lot of these orthopedic stuff. And most posture problems are reversible, even for older folks, as we talked about today. Quick way to kind of check, is it possible, is this something worth working on? Can you get them back to neutral, at least to a degree of neutral, passively or them actively? If you get them there, it's possible. If you can't get them there, or it causes pain to get them there, because they're so kyphotic or whatever, it's just kind of long-term kind of contracture kind of thing, maybe it's not the goal to kind of go after. But if you can get them into neutral, passively, actively, without pain, yes, it's possible, and it can help so many different things. Around pain and older folks around their lung capacity, all that sort of stuff. Poor posture results in increased risk for work-related injuries. Fatigue leads to that poor posture. Workstations, these are crazy examples, can lead to poor postures, lead to these DMPs, these dysfunctional movement patterns, and this whole overuse kind of thing with your muscles, and this pain cycle. Kind of getting into this overuse, underuse thing. We talked about the head posture a lot, in upper extremity. We're kind of really railing, especially in the scalenes and levators, if you have that forward head. The rounded shoulders, just kind of rounded a little bit there. Really getting into your subscapularis. Talked about in upper extremity week 2, if you had that or not. And the pec minor, all your frontal chest muscles really get tight through there. And then the excessive lack of curves, kind of like the flat back, it's kind of kyphotic, but just like an excessive posterior tilt or just a flat back. This is a key answer to one of your lecture questions. People always stumble on this on the quiz or the midterm exam. This flat back, this excessive posterior tilt going back, the pelvis, can lead to damage of the lumbar discs and really compromises those spinal extensors, gets them really tight, leads to a lot of spazzing and issues with your lower back. Pelvis, you need to get down the pelvis. The tilt, to me, it works if I think of it as a big bucket kind of thing. The bucket tilts forward, that's excessive anterior tilt. With that, this is excessive anterior. Can you see how the butt kind of sticks out a little bit? Got excessive curve there. That's the anterior tilt. Excessive anterior tilt. And then it could go too far the other way. Excessive posterior tilt. So it's pushing this way too much. And so you have that classic flat back. You'll have to look at pictures and for the exam and tell me whether it's an excessive anterior or posterior tilt. We'll do more of that. These are some examples of the tilt and the shifts that lead to all these kinds of problems. We're just focusing on the anterior posterior tilt, but you get that sway, that forward shifted pelvis kind of thing that can cause problems as well. You see with some people. A lot of times you see collapsed back. This is something separate from the tilt. Kind of got to separate your mind for a second. So there's the excessive posterior anterior tilt, and then there's like the collapsed back. So then by collapsed back, they're all kind of collapsed. They don't have the good trunk extension. Think of a child when they're walking around, generally speaking, and for the first time, they have really good trunk extension. You really have good tone and awareness of your muscles. And over time, over life, especially in our society, you're sitting so much, everything just kind of gets crunched up. We talked about the jelly belly, everything kind of gets kind of folded up. We want that good trunk extension back. It really helps balance out the muscles the way you want it to do and reduce pain, really. How do we do that? This is a great exploration he has, I think, which is one of his better ones. Exploration 11, I think you do on the week 3. It really engages these obliques on the side. Not so much these guys in the middle, but these guys on the side, these obliques, rectus obliques, and extends the trunk. And he really gives you an awareness of the extension trunk that you want and need as you're walking and going about your day. Okay, so breaking it down into the posture, different parts of the posture, what it looks like, kind of assessing it, and then treating it. This is kind of what it looks like. This is the anterior tilt. So this is our pelvis. It's tilting this way. Think of the bucket anteriorly. A lot of jobs where you're doing a lot of sitting, you'll see this. Hip flexors are getting really tight with this. The iliacus and psoas, which we want to get that tilt, but it's excessive. It's maybe tight in there, kind of all bound up. Some good stretches will get them into hip extension. Bringing their leg out like this to stretch these guys through here out. You need to engage those hip extensions more, engage the rectus more, that rectus abdominals, to get more of a flat belly kind of thing. Everybody wants that flat belly. In this case, it's a good thing to kind of bring them back more into neutral. Some exercises to do, some of these you may be familiar with. If you're on your back, that supine one where you push your belly into the mat or into the floor, and then you lift your legs up as you're pushing. It's a great one to engage the rectus abs and kind of flatten your back out a little bit more. Wall slides, it's one you're going to do with the Williamson one, I believe. You're kind of doing the same thing. You're pushing into the wall, you slide up and down, doing that in the lab, demonstrating that. Hip extensor engagement. Then we're going the other way. This is the posterior tilt, too flat, too much pushing that way, causing all kinds of problems. A lot of standing. You can really start to do a number on your back. A lot of these guys, you see them kind of waddling around, a lot of chronic low back muscle spasms. In this case, their abs are actually doing too much. You need to kind of relax those guys. They're too much on hyperdrive, pushing it back. And we're too much into a hip extension. Here, I'm going to get at that iliacus, and so as he talks about, to get not the excessive tilt, but just enough tilt to get into neutral. And we talked about a good place to get to neutral, if you're sitting on your ischium, your sit bones. Some good length exercises around that, especially those ones you've started out 1 through 4, to get that just right tilt. Especially the role of the abs. Overactive abs leads to that flat back, which again, and this is a key lecture question, disc damage, overengaged lumbar extensors, hip extensors. Need to engage the iliac and psoas to kind of bring it back into more neutral. The neck, we've talked a lot about the neck, to kind of review that again. Overused, the levators and scalenes, they're getting used and abused. And then the traps, kind of getting overly extended here. They can get sore, start to get a lot of triggers upper back. A lot of sitting jobs, looking down. So many jobs now you're looking down at your laptop, at your phone all day, a table. Exercise to address the chin tuck. Think of the military chin tuck. We'll do that. The wall lineup. I think I've showed you guys that in upper extremity or one class. The tilt, scapular retraction, rows, anything like that. The neck carriage one, the floating one. Exploration 5 that you've started doing. Rounded shoulders. Here's the rounded shoulders. This is kind of where we want to see how that lined up. Closer to their ears. When it's rounded, you're really wailing on the front part of the chest. The minor, the pec and major, pecs, pec major, pec minor, really getting tight through here. Teres major, subscap. We'll be palpating that in the upper extremity lab if you already haven't. Usually very, very sore because of those rounded shoulders. Underused, classically the rhomboids. Teres minor, infraspinatus, that external rotators, your shoulder, mid traps. Again, a lot of sitting and standing, turner jobs. Exercises to address the rows. The doorway stretch is a great one. Open up your chest. Just pulling your arms into extension is a good one. Gauging the iliacus and psoas to kind of line you back up again. And this is all of it together. You need to know really all of this for the midterm exam. Okay, so now we're moving on to the feet. Talks a little about the feet, the role of the feet. You know, with Vladimir, he had the forward head, rounded shoulders, and he had flat feet. He was kind of walking like rigid flippers. Think of the guy in flippers, kind of humping around, versus kind of a grasping kind of thing. He talks about grasping like when you walk in the sand, nice kind of roll and arch to your feet, almost the grasp and release of a hand kind of thing. Extension, arching foot similar to hand arch. Foot arch acts as a spring, shock absorber, wrist arch, foot arch. Knees and legs tilt forward, DMP, chain reaction. This is like if you have a DMP, if your knees and legs are kind of off, leads to foot fatigue, pain, low back pain, all that sort of stuff. You can really see it in the feet, but it's kind of leading, usually it's kind of related to upper problems further up with the knees and hips and sort of stuff. Oops, sorry. Trying to get real relaxed, soft knees, soft calf muscles. Again, that low, kind of moderate tone, not excessive banging and excessive tone. Don't want those fixed, tight ankles. That kind of leads to all kinds of issues around all the way up through the chain. Want that arch back into your feet. Really get at that arch. That pencil one, we'll go through that one. Expression 7 is a really cool one to get the weight back where you want it, kind of the part of the foot that you want it. And then the sweep exercise gets more arch back in your feet if you're just excessively flat-footed. So that flat-footed, this exercise here would be a great one for Vladimir to get the arch back into his foot. Bending. You're bending over. A huge part of ergonomics is proper bending. You guys know about the wide base, bending at the hip, bending your knees when you bend down. You really need to flex, kind of at the hips. So thinking of flexing at the hip joint, right in here. This is where you want to be flexing. That wide base, bending your knees for sure, but make sure you're flexing here, not further up along. Really try to get that hip flexion kind of area. And your weight is evenly distributed. Neck is on line with the rest of your spine. And we'll be assessing each other as you bend over. We have some bad habits, and kind of talking about that and trying to get that hip flexion back as you bend over. There's this little test we'll do in the lab too that kind of give you a sense of whether you're doing it the right way or not. Okay, so going back to Vladimir. How can we help him out? So let's tackle these things one at a time. So his neck. He's got the forward neck. Texting, definitely want him to text like this. You can tell him that environmentally. And we can give him that Williamson 5, that floating exercise. I don't know if Vladimir Putin will be into the floating exercise, but so we can get into that, so we can extend his neck, kind of relax his neck muscles. That may be a good one. Or maybe the chin tuck, he might be into that since he's in the military and all that sort of stuff. Or the wall lineup kind of one. Those are all good ones for his neck. Shoulder, to bring those shoulders back. Scapular retraction. If we get his tilt, more of a tilt to his pelvis, as we kind of saw with those explorations, and I think we did that in class, it will naturally roll his shoulders back. That's a key part of that, pelvis tilt. You can do some scapular retraction with that as well, some rows kind of thing. The duck feet, you could give him that grasping exercise, with just that sliding your foot to get that arch back into your foot we talked about. Talk about rolling on his feet, getting that grasp back versus that duck feet kind of thing. All right, that should fix him up so he's not coming after us there. All right. These are some of the resources. I'm just going to kind of go through them. That will be kind of breaking down in the lab. First one is Transfer Solutions. This is a great little simple tool thing. issues around sitting. It gives you the issue, signs of the problem, and then how to treat it. So you can, like, you see this problem with your patient, go to this chart. We'll give you some ideas. It's a great starting point. This is around the tilt. Verbal cues, they say they're just kind of all over the place when they're sitting. They kind of sideways or excessive posterior or anterior tilt. Modeling, tactile cues, kind of your NGT to kind of line them up where you want them with that slight tilt. A mirror can be really, really helpful. They can see themselves in the mirror, and a lot of times they can straighten themselves out. You can try the Winsome stuff. Some leg lifts, maybe to get some tilt back. Posterior tilt. Lack of trunk extension, they're all collapsed, which is very common, all slouchy. You can try the Spider-Man, the walk line. Lack of neck extension, try the floating one, that's low impact, easy to do. Protractor scap, definitely can do rows or whatever, but you can try that exploration, that may work. With transfers, a lot of times, they're not coming forward enough. You may see that you want them to come up, and you say, okay, that's nose over toes, and they just cannot get there. They're so tight or weak, or it's a neurological issue. We're going to get at an NDT, LSVT one that really helps with that. But basically, you're trying to get those hip and range of motion kind of back, modeling, cueing, NDT. Trunk flexion, holding a weighted ball might help with that. Kinetical link, movement, sit to stand, that's what we're going to do in the lab. Weak quads, exercise where you're working on the quads. Gastrocs, triceps for the arms, all that sort of stuff. Basic stuff, but it's all kind of there and organized for you. This is the core stuff. If you're thinking there's issues with the core, this really works well for kiddos too. It's kind of a common thing working with kiddos. How's their trunk rotation? How you can work on it. There's a little bit crooked. Try that one. Edge of bed without slouching. Standing on one leg. Can they do these things without kind of collapsing? Going down, and if they can't, maybe backing up on all fours. Can they have good control of their trunk and core, or they're collapsing even in all fours? Once they master that, can go out to one leg and then opposite leg and arm. It's all good core, basic core stuff. Again, some of it you know, some of you may not know, but it's organized, all there, one resource when you need it to grab it. And this is more involved core progression chart. The client that's in bed, what do you do with this bedbound patient? A lot of ideas, how to progress them and goals. The bed person you've got them out of bed, but they're on the edge of the bed. What can you do on the edge of bed? And then getting them up. They're standing, what can you do once they're standing? All kinds of great exercises and some images to go with them to help you with that. There's different levels of your patient you'll see in rehab. And then lastly, we have this great video that Marie Fieldbuck did. She's coming into one of the labs. She's OT, a lot of experience working with neuro patients. We kind of simulated it. It's a little bit goofy, but I think we get some good tips watching her work with me. I was trying to give her a hard time as a debilitated patient. Some of the stuff she works with is kind of cool. And she has some cases here, and she breaks down some of her tips, communication tips and ideas. Again, if you can get some confidence and looking for ideas, again, running into kind of a wall with a patient, you can't seem to get them to do what you want them to do, go to these other resources, get your brain kind of going again and get you hopping out with the patient. All right, that is all that. Kind of just what we went over in the lab. Going back to the questions, should be all able to answer these in the PowerPoint. If you can't, let me know, because you'll be quizzed on them in the midterm exam. And then coming up in week 3, this is what's going to be due week 3, part 2 of the exercises, this case assignment that will be posted at some point. And then, no, I shouldn't say in lab. The quiz is going to be right in class. That was last year. I just got that. And that is pretty much that for this week.